The morning sun filtered through the large windows of classroom 2B at the prestigious Saebom High School, illuminating the specks of dust that danced in the air. For Seo Yoon-ah, that light was like a spotlight that followed her everywhere. As class president, she sat with her back perfectly straight, her uniform impeccable, a serene smile adorning her face, while the literature teacher lectured on classical poetry. No one would suspect that beneath that facade of calm, her mind was miles away, weaving complex electronic melodies, rhythms, and synthesizers that only existed inside her laptop, hidden at the bottom of her backpack under layers of textbooks. Her life was a score perfectly written by her parents. High marks in every subject, prestigious extracurricular activities, and, finally, admission to one of the top 3 universities in the country. There was no room for her chaotic and passionate compositions. The normality of the day was subtly altered by a new presence. Kang Min-jun, the transfer student, observed the world from the back row next to the window. His aura was that of a storm cloud on a sunny day. The rumors had preceded him: a fight at his old school, an expulsion, a mystery. But he did nothing to confirm or deny them. He simply existed, with his headphones as a shield against the world. His eyes, however, missed nothing. He noticed the tension in Yuna's jaw every time the teacher praised her, the nervous tick in Choi Jin-woo's foot as he watched her, and the way Lee Harin, despite her easy laugh, checked her phone with a disguised anxiety. Min-jun wasn't looking for trouble, but he had an innate talent for seeing the cracks in perfect surfaces. That afternoon, during recess, Harin came running to Yuna's side, showing her her phone with enthusiasm. "Look, the new puppy-themed cafe just opened in Hongdae. We must go this weekend." Yuna nodded with her usual smile, although inside she was calculating the study hours she would lose. Jinwoo approached the desk, pretending to look for a book. "President Seo," he said in a formal tone that couldn't hide his nervousness. "The disciplinary committee needs the attendance reports for tomorrow." His gaze lingered a second longer than necessary on her, a mixture of admiration and resentment. Yuna was the sun around which the planets of her small school universe revolved, a sun that sometimes burned with too much intensity. The world of Classroom 2B was a delicate ecosystem, full of silent alliances, latent rivalries, and barely whispered secrets. Routine was the pillar that supported their lives. The mornings of intense study, the lunches in the noisy cafeteria, the afternoons of extracurricular classes. For Yuna, the only moments of true freedom came late at night. When her family slept, she would put on her headphones and open her music software. The muffled beats and ethereal melodies were her only escape, a secret language no one else understood. It was a world built just for her, a refuge from the pressure of being the perfect girl. One night, while saving a new track, she named it Rooftop, inspired by the solitary figure she sometimes saw in the distance during the day, Kang Min-jun. She wondered what music he listened to, what thoughts were hidden behind that impenetrable gaze that seemed to observe the world from above, as if he already knew its end. The first real encounter between Yuna and Min-jun was as silent as they were. She had gone up to the rooftop seeking a respite from the suffocating air of the library, only to find him there, his back to her, looking at the Seoul skyline. The wind tousled his rebellious hair. For a moment, Yuna considered turning back, but something stopped her. He took off one earbud, as if he had sensed her presence without even looking. "The door is supposed to be locked," he said, his voice deeper than she had imagined. "I know," Yuna replied, approaching the railing a few feet from him. They said nothing more. They simply shared the space, enveloped in the murmur of the city. It was the first time Yuna had felt comfortable in silence, without the need to fill the void with smiles or kind words. Meanwhile, the group's dynamic continued its course. Harin, with her ability to be everywhere, tried to include Minjun in her plans, more out of curiosity than genuine kindness. "Hey, transfer student, we're going for fried chicken after school. Are you coming?" Minjun simply looked at her and shook his head, returning to his music. Jinwoo saw Minjun not as a threat, but as an anomaly. He didn't care about grades. He didn't seek popularity. He was a non-entity in the school's social equation, and that somehow made him irritating. For Jinwoo, everything in life was a competition, and Minjun's apparent indifference was an insult to his efforts. The tension between them was palpable, a rope about to snap under the weight of their opposing personalities. One day, the music teacher announced an end-of-semester project, an original composition in groups of 2. Panic seized Yuna. Working with someone meant exposing her secret. Fate, with its cruel sense of humor, did the rest. Due to an odd number of students, the teacher decided to form a group of 3. Seo Yoon-ah, the academic prodigy, Choi Jinwoo, the ambitious vice president, and Kang Min-jun, the enigmatic transfer student. Jinwoo's expression was one of pure annoyance, while Min-jun just shrugged, indifferent. For Yuna, however, it was as if the floor had opened up beneath her feet. The project would force her to interact, to collaborate, to let her guard down. Her perfectly controlled world was about to be invaded by the 2 people she least wanted near her. The group's first meeting was a disaster. They met in an empty music room after class. Jinwoo arrived with a folder full of classical piano scores. "I propose a ballad. It's elegant and shows technical skill," he declared, looking to Yuna for approval. Yuna nodded, though the idea bored her to tears. Minjun, leaning against the wall, finally spoke. "It's boring." Jinwoo glared at him. "And what do you suggest, you musical genius? The sound of silence?" Minjun took out his phone and a pair of small earbuds, offering them to Yuna. "Listen." Hesitantly, she put them on. A wave of complex and melancholic sound enveloped her, a trip-hop beat with layers of atmospheric synthesizers. It was raw, emotional, and brilliantly produced. It was the kind of music she dreamed of creating. When Yuna took off the headphones, her expression had changed. She looked at Minjun in a new light, a mixture of surprise and recognition. "That is incredible." Jinwoo, feeling completely excluded and ignored, snorted. "We can't submit that. It's just noise. It's not real music." The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Yuna found herself trapped in the middle. On one hand, the safety of Jinwoo's plan, the path everyone expected her to take. On the other, the bold and unknown world that Minjun offered her, a world that resonated with her secret soul. The bell rang, marking the end of the school day, but for them, the real test was just beginning. Normality had fractured, and the foundations of their small world were beginning to tremble, preparing for the development that would inevitably follow. The music project became the battlefield where the trio's personalities clashed and occasionally found a common rhythm. The meetings were a choreography of tension. Jinwoo insisted on classical structure, arguing it was the only way to guarantee a good grade. Minjun, for his part, communicated through playlists and beat snippets that he sent to the group chat, challenging conventions without saying a word. Yuna, trapped in the middle, became the translator. She would take the harmonic bass of a Chopin piece proposed by Jinwoo and explain to Minjun how they could layer an electronic rhythm over it, while showing Jinwoo how an atmospheric synthesizer could evoke the same melancholy as a cello. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, something new began to be born from their discord. Outside the music room, the dynamic was also evolving. Yuna began to actively seek out the shared silences on the rooftop. They were no longer chance encounters. Sometimes they would just sit several feet apart, each in their own world, but together. One day, she dared to ask him what he was listening to. Without a word, he passed her an earbud. It was a mix of 90s alternative rock and underground hip-hop. She, in turn, let him listen to one of her compositions, a short, ambient piece she had made the night before. Min-jun listened with his eyes closed. When it was over, he simply said, "You have a good ear for texture." That simple compliment meant more to Yuna than all the academic praises she had ever received in her life. A bond was being forged, one based on shared secrets and unspoken melodies. Meanwhile, Harin was no stranger to the changes in her best friend. "You spend a lot of time on the rooftop lately," she commented casually during lunch with a hint of suspicion. "Has the sky become interesting, or is it the new boy?" Yuna felt a blush creep up her cheeks and dismissed it with a nervous laugh. "It's for the music project. You know, Jinwoo is intense." But Harin knew her too well. She saw the way Yuna's eyes sometimes searched for Min-jun in the hallways, the small smile that escaped her when she received a message on her phone. The friendship between the two girls, once so simple and transparent, was beginning to have layers, areas that Yuna deliberately kept in the shadows, and that unsettled Harin, the girl who knew everything, and piqued her curiosity. The infiltration plan of the Kims into the Park's house in Parasite is a perfect example of the Sung act. Similarly, the relationship between Yuna, Min-jun, and Jinwoo developed in a linear and progressive way. The tension increased, but not through a major conflict, but through small, cumulative moments. One day, they found Min-jun drawing in a notebook. They weren't doodles, but detailed, almost architectural designs of stages and urban landscapes. It turned out his father was an acclaimed set designer for theater, and Min-jun had inherited his visual talent. Jinwoo, seeing the quality of the drawings, couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. Min-jun wasn't just good at noisy music, he also had a tangible artistic talent. The image of the problematic slacker was beginning to crumble, revealing a much more complex person. The development of their song reflected that of their relationship. They began to merge their ideas. Jinwoo relented and composed a main piano melody, a beautiful but predictable piece. Min-jun took it and, instead of replacing it, sampled it, chopped it up, and reassembled it into a hypnotic loop. Then he added a deep bass line and a beat that gave it an unexpected urgency. Yuna, finally feeling inspired and confident, added layers of ethereal synthesizers and a wordless vocal melody, a ghostly choir that tied the disparate elements together. For the first time, the three of them listened to the result together in the music room. There was something magical about it. It was Jinwoo's elegance, Min-jun's rawness, and Yuna's secret longing, all in a single piece of music. In that moment, they weren't rivals or strangers. They were collaborators. The turning point came on a rainy afternoon. They were working late at school, polishing the final details of the song. A thunderclap echoed outside, and the classroom lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. Jinwoo, who always kept his composure, let out a small cry of surprise. Yuna, who hated the dark, froze. Before she could panic, a soft light illuminated the room. It was the screen of Min-jun's phone. He had approached her without a sound. "Are you okay?" he asked, his calm voice an anchor in the gloom. She nodded, though her heart was pounding. Jinwoo watched the scene from the other side of the room, the silhouette of both of them backlit by the phone's light, and a bitter, unfamiliar emotion settled in his chest. In that moment of darkness, the barriers fell. They began to talk. Not about the project, but about themselves. Jinwoo admitted for the first time the pressure he felt from his father, a prosecutor who expected him to follow in his footsteps. Yuna confessed her fear of disappointing her parents if they discovered her passion for music. Min-jun, surprisingly, also opened up. He talked about Busan, about how his mother's illness had forced them to move to Seoul to be closer to a specialized hospital. The famous fight at his old school had been in defense of a friend who was being bullied. He wasn't a delinquent. He was loyal. The vulnerabilities shared in that dark classroom united them more than all the hours of musical work. They were deepening their relationships, adding complexity and layers to what were once simple archetypes. As the deadline approached, the feeling of camaraderie grew. Even Jinwoo began to appreciate Minjun's approach. "That filter you put on the piano, it gives it an interesting texture," he admitted grudgingly one day, which for him was the equivalent of a great compliment. Minjun nodded, acknowledging the truce. The song, which they had titled Darkened Classroom, had become their secret anthem. The progress was palpable. However, this development was not without its complications. The closeness between Yuna and Minjun was becoming more and more evident. They shared glances, knowing smiles, and a pair of headphones more frequently. Jinwoo noticed everything, and his latent resentment was beginning to transform into a cold determination. If he couldn't win Yuna's affection, he would at least make sure he won the competition. The night before the presentation, they stayed very late. There was an electric energy in the air, a mixture of nerves and pride. Haren barked them coffee, observing the scene with a raised eyebrow. Well, well, who would have thought the three most unlikely musketeers would do something together? When she left, a comfortable silence settled in. Minjun looked at Yuna. "You should sing," he said suddenly. "Your voice, the one you used in the chorus, should be the lead." Yuna shook her head, terrified. "No, I can't. It's just a sketch." Jinwoo, to both of their surprise, intervened. "He's right. It's the missing piece." In that moment, Jinwoo's rivalry was overcome by his musical instinct. Yuna, feeling the unexpected support from both of them, felt a surge of courage. The sung act was complete. The relationships had developed, the initial plan, the project, had progressed, and the tension, though present, had not yet exploded. They were at the peak, just before the fall. The day of the presentation arrived. The school auditorium was filled with students and teachers. The trio was nervous, but also united by a newfound confidence. Darkened Classroom was their creation, a testament to their unlikely collaboration. When they were called to the stage, Yuna took a deep breath. Minjun gave her a discreet thumbs up. Jinwoo adjusted the piano microphone with a practiced professionalism. The piece began. Jinwoo's piano melody filled the auditorium, elegant and precise. Then Minjun's beat came in, deep and resonant, transforming the atmosphere. Finally, Yuna's voice, ethereal and full of longing, floated over the music. The audience was captivated. It was unlike anything they had ever heard before. For a moment, it seemed that all their effort had been worth it. The fusion of their worlds had created something beautiful. But the twist, doesn't arrive when expected. It wasn't a mistake in the presentation or a bad grade. It happened the next morning. The project results were posted on the school's bulletin board. Yuna, Haren, Minjun, and Jinwoo pushed their way through the crowd to see. There it was. Music project, Classroom 2B, and in first place, with an almost perfect score, was the name Choi Jinwoo, only his name. Below, in second place, with a significantly lower grade, were the names of Seo Yoon-ah and Kang Minjun. The title of their song was Incomplete Melody. The air froze. Yuna looked at Jinwoo, confused. He avoided her gaze, a look of guilty triumph on his face. Minjun said nothing, but his fists clenched at his sides. The confusion quickly turned into a bitter revelation. Jinwoo had betrayed them. He had submitted Darkened Classroom as his individual project. And for Yuna and Minjun, he had turned in an early, unpolished version of the song, an audio file from one of their first sessions, and had renamed it. He had used his position as vice president to access the project submission system the night before and switch the files. He had taken their work, their collaboration, their moment of connection, and turned it into a weapon for his own benefit. The discovery of the man in the bunker in Parasite recontextualized the entire film. Jin-woo's betrayal did the same. Suddenly, the story was no longer about a school project and a budding friendship. It was about unbridled ambition, betrayal, and the consequences of a secret. The confrontation was immediate and brutal. Yuna and Minjin cornered Jinwoo in the empty hallway next to the music room. "Why?" was all Yuna could say, her voice trembling with anger and pain. Jinwoo finally looked at her, his facade of composure cracking. "Why? Because I was sick of it, sick of being second, sick of seeing you, the perfect girl, get everything without effort, sick of that slacker coming from nowhere and impressing you with his noise." His words were poison. He turned to Minjin. "And you think you're better than everyone with your air of mystery, but you're just a fraud." Minjin took a step forward, his calm finally broken, but Yuna stopped him, placing a hand on his chest. This was deeper than a simple grade. This twist was completely unexpected. It wasn't a gradually developed conflict, but a bomb that exploded in the center of their world. It recontextualized everything that came before. The moments of collaboration now seemed like a farce. The vulnerability shared in the darkness felt like a manipulation. Jinwoo's grudging admiration was not genuine. It was the assessment of a thief measuring the value of what he was about to steal. The tension no longer came from their creative differences, but from the devastating impact of this new information. The story had shifted from a school drama with touches of romance to a psychological thriller about betrayal. The light comedy and tender moments of the previous acts now felt like a distant, painful memory, seen through the lens of this new, horrible reality. The revelation had a domino effect. Harin, upon learning of the betrayal, was enraged. Using her social detective skills, she unearthed something that not even Yuna knew. Jinwoo had not only stolen the song, he had also subtly spread rumors about Minjun, exaggerating the story of his fight in Busan and painting him as a bad influence on the perfect class president. He was trying to isolate them, to break the trust between them all. This element, seemingly unrelated, added a new layer of premeditation to Jinwoo's act. It wasn't a last-minute impulse, it was a calculated plan. The narrative was no longer about a love triangle or an academic rivalry. It was about a deliberate sabotage that threatened to destroy reputations and friendships. The real blow, however, came from an unexpected source. The news of the winning song reached the ears of Jinwoo's father. Proud, he shared his son's composition with a friend, a well-known music producer. The producer, impressed by the originality of the piece, uploaded it to an online music platform, giving credit to Choi Jin-woo. Within hours, Darkened Classroom began to gain traction, praised for its innovative fusion of genres. Jin-woo's lie was no longer contained within the school walls. It had become public, viral. Yuma and Minjin had not only been betrayed by a friend, but now they watched as their creation was celebrated around the world with someone else's name attached. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. Minjun, who had always avoided conflict, was on the edge. The injustice was too blatant. One afternoon, he found Jinwoo alone and confronted him, this time without Yuna to stop him. The argument grew heated, and for the first time, the violence the rumors attributed to him seemed about to erupt. But at the last second, Minjun held back. "You're not worth it," he spat, with a contempt sharper than any punch. However, a passing student saw the confrontation and, of course, misinterpreted it. The rumor spread like wildfire. The problematic Kang Min-jun had attacked the talented Choi Jin-woo out of jealousy. Jinwoo's lie was solidifying, building a wall of falsehoods around him, while Yuna and Minjun's truth was buried beneath it. The final and most painful twist came from Yuna herself. Overwhelmed by the pressure, the betrayal, and the sudden unwanted attention, she confronted her parents. In a fit of desperation, she confessed everything: her secret passion for music, the project, Jinwoo's betrayal. She expected, if not understanding, at least support. Instead, her father looked at her with cold disappointment. Electronic music? You've been wasting your time on that? You should be studying. And now you get involved in this scandal with a problematic boy and accuse a prosecutor's son? You have brought shame to this family. The twist was not just Jinwoo's betrayal. It was the complete invalidation of her inner world by the people she loved most. The golden cage she lived in slammed shut. She was completely alone. The story was no longer about winning or losing a competition. It was about the struggle for her own identity against a world that conspired to erase it. The aftermath of the twist was a period of desolation. Yuna retreated into her shell, her smile becoming an empty mask. She stopped composing, the music software on her laptop remaining closed, a painful reminder of her crushed passion. At school, she avoided everyone, moving like a ghost through the hallways. Minjun, for his part, reacted with a cold, silent anger. The energy he once channeled into music, he now contained within himself, creating an even greater distance from the world. The breakup between the protagonists was not caused by a romantic misunderstanding or noble idiocy, but by the crushing weight of betrayal and helplessness. Jinwoo, meanwhile, lived at the top of his mountain of lies, accepting praise for darkened classroom, but the victory felt hollow, and the accusatory glances of his former companions weighed on him. The conclusion, the reconciliation of the disparate elements, began with an unexpected act of loyalty. Harin, unable to bear the injustice, decided to take matters into her own hands. She couldn't prove the theft of the song, but she could attack the base of Jinwoo's power, his reputation. Using her network of contacts and her social media skills, she began posting anonymously on the school forums. She didn't make direct accusations, but rather asked questions. Isn't it strange that the style of the winning song is so different from everything Choi Jin-woo has done before? Did anyone else notice that Kang Minjun and Seo Yoon-ah were always in the music room with him? She planted seeds of doubt, creating cracks in Jin-woo's perfect narrative. It was an information guerrilla war, and it was working. The next step toward resolution came from Minjun. One day, after school, he waited for Yuna outside her house. They hadn't really spoken in days. Without a word, he handed her his phone and a pair of earbuds. She hesitated, but finally took them. What she heard was not one of his usual mixes, but a recording. It was Jinwoo's voice, from that night in the darkened classroom, admitting the pressure he felt from his father. Then her voice, confessing her fear of disappointing her family. And finally, Minjun's voice, explaining the real reason he moved from Busan. Minjun had been recording their work session that night, not out of distrust, but to capture ideas. He had completely forgotten about the recording until now. It didn't prove the theft, but it proved their connection, their collaboration, their truth. That recording was the spark Yuna needed. The sound of their voices together, sharing their vulnerabilities, reminded her of what they had created and why it was important. It wasn't about the grade or the fame, but about that moment of honesty. She realized that by giving up her music, she was letting Jinwoo win in the deepest way possible. She was allowing him to steal her voice. That night, for the first time in weeks, she opened her laptop. She didn't compose anything new. Instead, she gathered all the audio files she had, the snippets, the first takes, the discarded loops, the voice recordings. She had the complete history of the creation of Darkened Classroom in her hands. the irrefutable evidence of their shared authorship. The final confrontation was near. The climax did not occur in the principal's office or in a public confrontation. It was more intimate and, therefore, more devastating. Yuna and Minjun requested a meeting with the music teacher and asked that Jin-woo and his father be present. In the meeting room, with the 4 adults looking at them, Yuna connected her laptop to the speakers. "We are not here to argue about a grade," she said, with a calmness that surprised everyone, including herself. "We are here to reclaim our story." She played the files, one by one. Jin-woo's piano melody, alone. Minjun's first clumsy beat, her own voice humming a melody. And then the recording of the conversation in the dark. Jin-woo's father, an imposing man, listened with an increasingly grim expression. When Yuna finished, the silence in the room was deafening. Jin-woo's father did not look at Yuna or Minjun. He looked at his own son, and for the first time, Jin-woo saw in his father's eyes not anger, but a deep, crushing disappointment. The same look Yuna had feared from her own parents. In that moment, Jin-woo's world collapsed. There were no shouts or excuses. He simply broke, confessing everything between sobs. The gyeol, the conclusion, was not so much about the victory of the heroes, but about the fall of the antagonist under the weight of his own transgression. The main conflict was resolved, not with external punishment, but with an internal implosion. The villain got what he deserved, not through revenge, but through the truth. The consequences were swift. The school launched a formal investigation. The song was removed from the online platform, and a public apology was issued. Jin-woo was suspended and stripped of his position as vice president. But for Yuna and Minjun, Jin-woo's punishment was secondary. The important thing was that they had gotten their story back. A few days later, they found Yuna's father waiting for them. He didn't seem angry, just tired. He looked at his daughter and said, "I heard the song, the full version. It's beautiful. I don't understand your world, Yuna, but I want to try." It was a bittersweet resolution, the beginning of a long road to understanding. But it was a start. The clash between the original situation, Yuna's perfect life, and the twist, the betrayal and the revelation of her passion, was resolved into a new harmony. The epilogue, as in many K-dramas, tied up the loose ends. On the last day of the semester, Yuna and Minjun were on the rooftop again, watching the sunset. The school had offered them the opportunity to officially perform their song at the year-end festival. They had accepted. Haren became their self-proclaimed manager, promoting the event throughout the school. It was even rumored that Jin-woo, after returning from his suspension, had visited the friend his father had defended in Busan to apologize, the first step on his own lonely path to redemption. The subplots found their closure, providing a sense of finality. Minjun passed an earbud to Yuna, a new melody, one she hadn't heard before. It was optimistic, with an energetic rhythm and bright synthesizers. "It's for the festival," he said. "What do you think?" Yuna smiled, a genuine smile, the first in a long time. "It's missing something," she said, pulling out her own phone to show him a melodic line she had written that morning. "I think it's missing my voice." They looked at each other, the sunset light bathing their faces. There was no dramatic love confession or passionate kiss. It wasn't necessary. Their connection had been forged in silence, tested by betrayal, and finally expressed through their music. The melody of secrets had ended, and in its place, a new symphony, one of honesty and hope, was about to begin.